The reason that plagiarism is such a serious offense in any academic sector, whether schools or universities, you can be thrown out for plagiarism, is because plagiarism is a form of theft. You're stealing somebody else's ideas and passing them off as your own. Well, the same would apply to stealing someone else's life experiences, to inventing, you may say, a past that's not your own, but that you've lifted without authorization from somewhere else. Recently, Kamala Harris was featured on the cover of Elle magazine, and she told a touching story that's been circulating in social media about how from the youngest of ages she was committed to protest and to political freedom. So let me read from Elle magazine, Kamala essentially talking about herself. And here's the story. At some point, the writer says, she, Kamala, fell from her stroller, and the adults, caught up in the rapture of protest — this is supposedly a civil rights protest in Oakland, California — just kept on marching. By the time they noticed little Kamala was gone and doubled back, she was understandably upset. Now, this is Kamala talking. My mother tells a story about how I'm fussing, Harris says, and she's like, baby, what do you want? What do you need? And I just looked at her and I said, freedom. Now, this is a kind of sweet, if corny, story about a young kid who from the earliest of ages aspires, you may say, to liberation, to civil rights. But it turns out that this is not Kamala's story at all. A clever sleuth on the internet named Freddie Engels — he's at Engels Freddie — spotted this exact story was told by Martin Luther King in a 1965 interview with Playboy magazine. I'm now going to read from that interview. This is Martin Luther King speaking. I will never forget a moment in Birmingham, not Oakland, but Birmingham, when a white policeman accosted a little Negro girl 7 or 8 years old who was walking in a demonstration with her mother. What do you want? The policeman asked her gruffly, and the little girl looked him straight in the eye and answered, freedom. So there you go. Now, could Kamala Harris have been the little girl in Martin Luther King's story? Clearly not. Why? Because the Playboy article appeared in 1965. Martin Luther King was interviewed a little earlier. He was talking about an incident that occurred even earlier in Birmingham. He was talking about a little girl who was 7 or 8 years old. Kamala Harris was born in October of 1964, so she could not have been the girl that King was talking about. Rather, she learned about the story and she made it her own. She invented it, pretended like she was the girl in the story. The real Kamala Harris is not a freedom fighter of any sort. In fact, she's a descendant of enormous privilege. She's descended directly from one of the richest slave owners in Jamaica, a man who owned multiple plantations and hundreds of slaves. This has now been documented in the record. It's undisputed. So what Kamala Harris is trying to do here is get away from her real history, which is embarrassing, and create this fictitious history so she can identify with identity politics. She can be kind of the young heroine of the civil rights movement. She can be, in short, something that she never really was.